Those boys out of the Thailand cave, but what happens to them now?
We're going to talk to a psychologist about how the boys will heal emotionally after their grueling ordeal when we come back.
You can only imagine all the PTSD that they're going to be dealing with and lots of just. Our top story of the morning, we continue to talk about those 12 boys and their coach who were successfully rescued from that cave in Thailand.
Yeah, they had 2 weeks. They were in that flooded cave. They've all been rescued. Fortunately, most of them are in good health. But what about their mental health? We're joined now by therapist Rhodes Levin, who specializes in anxiety and PTSD.
Yeah.
So good morning.
Good morning. So talk to us about what exactly is PTSD? Because it's talked about so much, but help define it for a lot of people who may be confused about it.
Absolutely. PTSD is actually a survival thing that happens to the brain where scary information is stored in the amygdala, in your limbic system, so that if you saw someone eaten by a lion, that if you have any other things going on, you're hyper vigilant. So anything that slightly resembles what your trauma was, your brain's going to react to, like, oh, we have to pay attention here. And it makes the world feel less safe. And people's worlds tend to become smaller because they stay with what they're comfortable with.
So how do you treat that?
You know, I treat it a lot with CBT and with neurofeedback, which is making great progress with the brain. And what I think really helped in this situation, hopefully, is some spirituality, too.
Well, speaking of spirituality, I want to get to that in a second, but really quickly, we want to talk about the latent effects. Like, these boys come out and they sound, and reports say they're happy, they see their parents through a glass wall, which is probably traumatizing in and of itself, because you probably want to hug your parents.
Right, exactly.
But what are the signs of latent kind of PTSD when it comes out later? Because you just talked about compartmentalizing it in your brain.
Absolutely, because I think they're still in shock, and a lot of them had physical conditions, which also informs the brain of trauma. My body's in trouble. So I know that family is a really big component in Thailand. I know there is a spiritual aspect to it. But how these kids are treated, especially because there's so much attention on them right now. It's like cameras and the whole world and Facebook. And then when the next story moves in next week, who's going to support them? Who's going to be there for them emotionally? And I think that will be dependent on each of their families.
Well, you bring up the spirituality, which hopefully, they got in touch with. But apparently the coach studied at a monastery.
Yes, for 10 years.
For 10 years, and was meditating with them in the cave. And obviously in Thailand, meditation and spirituality is an important thing. Do you think this was extremely helpful?
I do. I think it's incredibly helpful because I think kids look to the adult in the room. And these little wild boars, their team, they've been a cohesive team for a long time and looked up to this coach. So the fact that he was able to present, we're okay, we're calm, really informs them of what they're going to feel.
Yeah, there's a lot of joy today, but there also was this Thai Navy SEAL who died.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Is there survivor's guilt with that? Does the coach feel especially guilty because he was in some ways responsible for these kids? How do they cope with the sort of contrast in the joy and the sorrow?
You know, I think, again, it's going to be individual, and there is so much observation of what should I have done in this situation. So I think survivor's guilt is certainly a possibility. And I hope also, too, that the families who lost this Thai diver get the recognition that they need in all this joyous, this is such a great event that we feared and nothing bad happened, but something did.
So if you were treating these kids, what would you do with them now?
You know, I'm trying to reintroduce the phrase, come to your senses. Your senses are in the same part of your brain as your amygdala is, but your frontal cortex, the thing that wants to think you out of it, which is going to have flashbacks and all that kind of stuff, you can't touch your amygdala with your frontal cortex and think your way out of it. But your five senses, being present, being in the moment, connecting with the fact that you're safe now, what can you do in your environment to be safe, to smell good things, be comforted, that keeps you present and far away from those flashbacks and scary.
Basically nature.
Yeah.
Yes,
nurture and nature, everything.
Yeah. Well,
together.
Thank you very much, and you can see her in practice in my hometown of Agora Hills.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up.